And we welcome to the show Andrew Miller from Maroon and White Nation. Andrew, how you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you guys?
Doing great, doing great.
Doing
First off,
good.
I'd like to apologize on behalf of this show for unanimously picking Mississippi State over South Carolina this week. The curse of unanimous picks had to hit somewhere, and apparently Tennessee was not going to be that team. We did get a twofer, though, by the way, because we all unanimously picked Texas A&M over LSU as well, so that clearly backfired this week as well. But we're sorry for you guys over there in Bulldog Nation.
Yeah, thanks for that. It's a tough loss, but obviously Carolina's playing a lot better than I think we all would have expected coming into the year. That's a tough place to play when it gets packed out, and you know the issues you had getting into foul trouble and with the rebounding, it was going to be tough to overcome. So hopefully they can turn things around this week.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, in the past on this show, we've asked our guests a fun question at the end. I've had a rough week as an Arkansas fan, so I need a laugh this week. Tell me exactly why you hate Ole Miss so much. Please, just please fill me in as a Mississippi State fan.
The number one word, and I think most SEC fans would agree with me. It's the arrogance. Arrogance more than anything else. And look, I understand they are starting to turn things around in football for them. That's great, whatever. That is one of the cockiest fan bases you will run into. And also, they're annoying me extra right now. Like, they've got this ridiculous Twitter presence, a bunch of these morons with Pete Golding profile pics just going after any and everyone. So they're pretty bad right now. Incredibly annoying, incredibly arrogant for a program that, like, let's face it, I mean, not across all sports. Not exactly like they're that much better than really anyone else. Frankly, they're compared to most of the SEC a lot worse. And I'm not going to toot Mississippi State's horn. Don't get me wrong. I'm not that out of whack about my opinion of my own program, but they certainly seem to believe that they are in a tier that they are not, and that arrogance gets to you quite a lot. So that'd
I
be the
I
biggest thing
enjoy
right
it.
there.
I love the passion behind rivalry, and it just makes my day just a little bit better hearing that. Just a little bit because Saturday was a rough one. All right, let's talk about State. Coming into the season, expectations were very high, and then you had the injury to Tolu Smith, but he's back now. How much do you think Tolu Smith actually raises the ceiling for Mississippi State? Because they played very well in the non-conference besides that game against Southern.
Yeah, this was after what Chris Chance was able to do in year one. There were very high expectations around this program. I think there were false expectations created going into Ben Howland's last season. Fan base was trying to run with this feels like 96 thing that did not pan out whatsoever. So now with what Chris Chance was able to do with the experience you had coming back, you get to the tournament a year ago. This was as excited as I've seen state fans be about basketball in a very, very long time. And obviously that was such a big blow when you hear that Tolu goes down, and it's like, man, if he's going to be back early timeline, you were thinking mid-January at the earliest. And I'll be honest, the phrasing they used when they released the statement made me think they may not know if he's going to play this season at all, because they left that very vague and very open-ended. And then thank God a few weeks later you start to hear it sound like actually the timeline could be pushed up, and you end up getting him back right before the start of conference play. He's an outstanding player, and it absolutely does raise State's ceiling to being, I think, a top half team in the SEC. I think you potentially could have been that without him with the way that you saw Jimmy Bell performing throughout non-conference. But, I'm not going to come on here and say SEC contender. I think I replied when you guys asked this question on Twitter a couple of days ago. I think maybe I was talking in terms of the tournament, but in terms of the SEC tournament, maybe a double bye, be a top four team within the league could kind of be conceivable. Offensively, you are still a little bit limited, especially in your backcourt with your shooting. So I don't think you can truly win a title, but I think this can be a team that could maybe be in the mix late in the season. So yeah, it's a huge piece to have back.
Yeah, for sure. And that makes a ton of sense to me. State was definitely one of the teams that we had circled for a sleeper in this conference toward the beginning of the season. But then that pick got a little rockier because same like you, the reaction to Tolu Smith, we weren't exactly sure. Maddie, you have the next question if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, Andrew, you mentioned offense, and that really, I think, is what kind of held this team back last year. So from what you've seen so far this season, how have some of those concerns been addressed, up to this point?
The name is Josh Hubbard. That's kind of where the offense is coming from. That was it's weird to call it a recruiting win because the guy signed with Ole Miss out of high school. But once Kermit Davis gets fired, and that was kind of the relationship holding that together. He, gets out of his letter of intent and is able to sign with MSU, and he has been an absolute superstar. And the surprising part is sort of a guy that you picked up in the offseason that hasn't been a contributor. Like, you thought it was going to be Andrew Taylor, the transfer out of Marshall, who last year was over 20 points per game. Really haven't seen him this year. Right now, he's not with the team for a personal matter. It's kind of been iffy what's going on there. But the expectation when State picked him up is, okay, that's going to be the guy who's that presence in the backcourt, who's just going to come in and be able to drain shots. It's been Josh Hubbard. And for a true freshman to provide the spark that he has, it's really changed what this team can be. Because last year, so often, everything you did offensively was 100% being driven through Tolu Smith. It's get it to him, let him create, and hope you do enough elsewhere to hold on to grind out a win. And you would typically get, okay, maybe one guy, one other player can step up in an individual game. You didn't have anyone else providing consistent performances week by week. Hubbard thus far has been that guy. Right at the end of non-conference, he hit that little bit of a freshman wall that you would expect, but I mean, he started to look a little bit into form against South Carolina. So he's been an outstanding player and just a massive revelation for this team.
I absolutely agree there.
Yeah.
I'll grab that next one. Go ahead, man. No, absolutely. Go ahead, Maddie.
I was just going to say, Josh Hubbard's definitely been a big surprise for the SEC this season. That was actually, our next question, but you laid it out there perfectly. With him being outside of the top 15 and freshmen coming in, I think he's been a big boost to Mississippi State for sure.
Totally. And look, I think elsewhere you are getting a little bit more consistency for some other players. Shaquille Moore was someone who last year, it kind of felt like when State was at their best, it was when Shaq Moore was performing. And he had a solid game against South Carolina. He missed the first couple games of the season, I believe, with the suspension was the deal there. It's been a while now. I don't remember exactly what the circumstances were, but since he's come back, he's someone who I think is probably the best at just making a shot on the team. When there's nothing there, he'll find a way to get it to drop. If you can get a little bit more consistency out of him, DJ Jeffries, I think if they can get him to stop insisting so much on trying to shoot the three ball, he's supposed to be that wing player, and it's never fully materialized. He's had like one really good game in that role. Get him to be a little bit more of a slasher, I think, is going to help things a lot. But yeah, more than anything, it's Hubbard and what he's been able to add, just giving you someone you can consistently rely on in the backcourt. It's helped out a lot.
He has been fantastic. And yeah, when we did our freshman 15, I wish we would have done a profile on him for sure. But we've talked about the offensive end of the ball a little bit. Let's turn to the defense. State's defensive numbers, again, their defensive rating in yet fourth. Several other categories remain amongst the best of the SEC under Jans for another season. How do you think State's defense will impact some of the better offenses that are in this conference this year?
They're just suffocating. And you saw some of that at the start of the South Carolina game. Unfortunately, the Gamecocks then started to knock down some threes and change it. But like the first 5 minutes of the game, Carolina only had like one bucket or something like that. And they just get after you and will contest. They do not leave a lot of open shots. They leave pretty much everything contested. They're not going to give you many easy looks. I mean, every now and then you'll get a guy out of position, but that's just going to happen. I think we saw a lot of it last year. Several of the best offenses in the league had plenty of games where you played Mississippi State and you're not going to get the production you're used to. So it's a great defense. I think they just play really hard on that side of the ball. And that's sort of a recurring theme. Every starter on that team, kind of what you'll hear is great defense. Cam Matthews, like he's never been a big scorer. And at this point, I think this is the end of his career. He's not going to be that guy. But he is going to give his all on defense. DJ Jeffries, who I just spoke about, despite sometimes not having the shooting that you would like, he plays great defense. Shaquille Moore adds a lot of that. And frankly, if you're going to play for Chris Jans, you have to. So it's just a suffocating defense in all measures, and they're going to present a lot of problems for teams.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. It's definitely right in your face defense, and I do love that style. So let's talk about one of those better offenses, like Alabama. Before we get into the previews, that we'll get into that in a second. But actually, what I want to talk about is a little bit of bracketology. Now, obviously, you're not a bracketologist, but I do want to ask. South Carolina, you end up losing to South Carolina, which was kind of a needed game based on the schedule that you have coming up because you have several tough games, but with several good quad one win opportunities. First things I want to ask is, how are you feeling about this team coming off the South Carolina loss? And second, how important are these next two quad one opportunities for State's season?
It'll be massive. And going back to the South Carolina game, I kind of spoke on this earlier. The performance itself is not what concerns me because again, it's a road game, very difficult place to play. And at this point, we just have to give Lamont Paris and the Gamecocks credit. They are playing very good basketball. And State has home and away with them every year. I think that's changing with the expanded SEC, but that's been part of that rotation. That's been a tough place for State to win. They usually split that series with the Gamecocks. So the loss itself is not that out of the ordinary in the way the game played out. And I hope any Gamecocks fans listening do not take this as me trying to, diminish the win. There, I do think was some flukiness in how Mississippi State played in that dominated on the boards. I mean, it was a 35-26 advantage for South Carolina, a team that's not insanely great at rebounding. Mississippi State typically has the edge there. I think it's going to be rare you have many games where State gets beat that bad on the boards. And I don't think State's the type of team that can overcome getting beat on the boards in that way. And you also saw it with the foul calls. As much foul trouble as you got into, your best rebounders were off the court. When you talk about Tolu Smith, Cam Matthews, and Jimmy Bell. And then obviously when they are on the court, they're not going to be as aggressive because they don't want to get more fouls called on them and get out of the game. So that impacted things. And again, I promise I'm not trying to do this as like, we're just making excuses, blame the refs or anything like that. I'm just saying, like, I don't think you will see that from State consistently going forward. So the performance itself doesn't worry me that much. It's the fact of, like you talked about, the games you have coming up. Tennessee and Alabama, two of the better offenses you're going to face in the league. Obviously, the Vols with what they can do on defense is going to be, I talk about suffocating for Mississippi State. They're plenty suffocating as well. And yes, those games are at home, but students, I don't think, return to Starkville. Classes don't start till the 16th. So maybe for the Alabama game, you have a pretty good amount of people back in town. But for the Tennessee game, I don't know. I mean, I'd love to be there, but I live 4 hours away. So I don't think I'll be able to make that. So I wonder, do you have the type of home court advantage that is going to really be able to turn those games? Because we know that's so important in the SEC, but unfortunately, I don't know what the atmosphere is going to be like, just to be frank. And yeah, those are two teams that I can challenge you in a lot of ways. And because of that, like, could State win one of those games? Absolutely. And if you get one immediately, that cancels out taking the loss to South Carolina. Realistically, though, the Gamecocks were the better opportunity to pick up a big win early in the season. And look, they overcame a 1-7 start in league play last year. Like, I guess it can be done, but you don't want to put yourself in that type of position. So it was definitely tough to take the loss solely because of what you have going forward on the schedule.